Welcome to the Habits and Hustle podcast, a podcast that uncovers the rituals, unspoken habits, and mindsets of extraordinary people. A podcast powered by Habit Nest. Now here's your host, Jennifer Cohen.
Welcome to Habits and Hustle. We have a very special guest today. Her name is Nicole LePera, and otherwise known as the Holistic Psychologist, who has, if you are on social media to any extent and are interested in any kind of personal healing or work, you probably have come across her stuff a gazillion times. And I'm so happy to have you as our guest today. So thank you, Nicole, for being here.
Of course. Thank you, Jen. I'm truly honored to be here with you today.
Oh my gosh. Well, I was saying just before we started filming that it's amazing to me how quickly you've grown. Like I was just, last probably 7 or 8 months, I was saying that I've been really kind of noticing your work. And you kind of, I assumed that you were like doing this for years online. And you've like, over 3 million followers just on Instagram alone, and engaged 3 million. I'm not talking like just like people kind of casually coming to your page. And it's only been like you just said,
yeah, I went on to create the account in July 2018, so a bit over 2 years.
Now, is that surprising to you even that you've had such traction and that people have been that's resonated so deeply with people so quickly?
Yeah, really surprising. I mean, My intention when I created the account was really twofold. The first really intention was creating a space for me to begin to speak what I was coming to understand were my new truths about myself as a healing human, and also myself as a practitioner, coming to the awareness that the way I was working really wasn't serving myself and my clients. So the Instagram account was like, okay, here's my little space where I can start to talk about what I was starting to understand was holistic wellness. My other intention was to start to connect with other people who were speaking the same language. I was at the part of my own healing journey where I think, as a lot of us do, starting to feel really lonely, really disconnected, like people around me weren't really kind of aligning. So going online, I would have never imagined it would have snowballed into the account that it is now. I understand the growth, I think, is really a testament to the universality of what I'm talking about. I think a lot of us, and the community is very international. So wherever you're really living in the world, I think these truths are resonating, whether it's when I'm talking about all of the reasons why we're stuck. A lot of my content talks about that. And then also the pathway to healing. So the second I showed up and began to talk about this, I was mind blown at how much resonance and from where in the world it was coming.
Wow.
And it's been incredible. And while I said one of my intentions was to create the community, the fact that they're showing up and resonating and, like you said, very engaged, that is just blowing me away. And quite honestly, it helps me in my own healing as well.
Wow. Yeah. I think that you are very unique though, right? Because it's not traditional psychology. That's why you call yourself the Holistic Psychologist. Where did you even come up with even calling yourself that name? Because even in the name itself, it's very different, right? From your traditional.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was trained traditionally, as I think a lot of us are, in Philadelphia, where I used to live. I had the private practice where, I had the office and I would do talk therapy. And what I came to realize is that I wasn't really helping people, that I was still struggling myself. For me, the name of the game was anxiety. As long as I can remember, I was a little girl, scared of the world, hiding under tables, any thump in the night. I was assuming it was the worst case thing, the robber, the thing that's going to hurt me. So as long as I can remember, I was very, aware of the kind of struggles that I think a lot of us have. And I went down the very traditional pathways to try and heal myself. I was on medication. I did talk therapy. And it kind of was just always there. And I wasn't really getting better. And what I started to see week after week with clients once I opened up my practice was a lot of the similar patterns. In amazing amounts of awareness. People coming in week after week with these breakthroughs, these aha moments, knowing exactly what I want to do differently the next time this thing happens to, break that pattern, whatever it may be. And then yet that person would come in that next week with kind of a repetition of the same, I engaged in that same pattern, I drank, I fought with my partner, what have you.
Right.
So I really was seeking to understand what is going on. Why can't any of us maintain changes, and myself included?
Right.
And then what I came to realize through, an evolution, my own dark night of the soul, hitting bottom, really questioning myself, my life, my purpose, my own lack of fulfillment, here, in this earth experience. And what I came to realize is that I wasn't working with the whole human. Coming from a traditional system where it's kind of very much the medical model, right? When our body is sick, you go to the body doctor. When your mind is sick, you go to me, I'm the mind doctor. And those things are very separate. And nowhere was anything talked about in terms of spirituality, a soul, something else. So what I came to realize is that separation was why a lot of us were really stuck. It's because we were operating with imbalances in one or more of those areas, in my physical body, maybe in my emotional self or my spiritual self. And that's why I wasn't actually creating change. So that's what holistic now means to me.
Right.
It means understanding that we are interconnected human. We have these, I talk really simplistically, we have these parts, if you will.
No,
we have this
good.
physical body
simply,
and all that comes along with our physical needs. We have an emotional body. We have energies and hormones that run through us that give us our feelings, our emotions, and they're very complicated.
Right.
And I think a lot of us now are waking up to a reality that there might be something else. There, whether or not you want to call it something spiritual or a soul, I think a lot of us are starting to search for that essence, that like something else.
Yeah.
And so that's what holistic means to me, is acknowledging the wholeness of us and then seeking to understand what's driving our stuckness. Because I'm of the belief that it is an imbalance, like I said, in one of those areas that's keeping us repeating the patterns.
Right. So you said a couple of things I find very interesting, the patterns. I want to get into that because I do feel we constantly relive the same patterns, even if, and it's not for people who are very insightful, who are smart, and they're self-aware. It's not for just people who I think are just completely like going about their business, have zero self-awareness. In fact, it's even more difficult for people who are self-aware and who are insightful, because you actually think that you can fix yourself by just acknowledging it. But I find like you said, it's like such a perfect way of saying it, that like the more insightful you are, you go into therapy and you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it and how it came about, but still the pattern is not changing.
Yes.
So what does someone do?
Yeah. And I think, and the reason why I talk so much about the reason why we're stuck, which I'll go into in a minute, and then obviously how we create change and become unstuck. But I mean, thank you for kind of acknowledging that, Jen, because I do agree. And a lot of us tend, to feel maybe very shameful about our inability to change, especially those of us that are, kind of observing ourselves, locked in, I call it in Groundhog's Day, locked in that same pattern, right? And so the more insightful we become, I think the more shameful we become.
Right.
And, some of us start to make statements, internally, maybe about ourselves, maybe externally, and we start to think I'm broken. I can't change. This is what I'm destined to do. Maybe I'm genetically chipped in this way and I can't, have the life that I want.
Right.
And I believe that too. So I share my story a lot because I came from very much limiting beliefs. I felt like there was certain things that maybe it was my body was capable of, or maybe emotionally. I felt very flat all of the time. I thought maybe that's just the kind of person I am. I'm just very even keel. I don't feel highs. I don't feel lows. I feel nothing. I came to realize that's not really who I am. I was very, kind of like stuck in that very constricted way, based again on this patterning. So to find our way out, I like to talk about the reason why we're stuck. And I'm happy you brought that up because, like I said, I want to relieve the shame. There's a very real reason why a lot of us are stuck. It lives in our evolution, it lives in our bodies, and it lives in a very deep part of our mind called our subconscious. That is the part from which most of us are living our day in that autopilot. Right.
Absolutely. So then what is someone, even like you using yourself as an example, you said that, and I find it very interesting because we always end up in the career that we actually ourselves have an issue with, right? So then you kind of like, if you have body image issues, you end up in the fitness business or in competitions. A lot of times, like if you have like something going on in your, and they're all actually as you were saying, it's all very like interconnected, right? Because everything starts with like your mind. But what was your pattern, and how did you stick yourself, I guess? And if that makes sense.
My healing, as I think a lot of our journeys do, the statement that we all love to hate, and a little bit of it's not linear, right? There was certain shifts and changes that began to happen for me, and what kind of sent me into the journey was an accumulation of actually physical symptoms. So someone, my whole life I knew anxiety, like I said, so I'm very familiar with panic attacks. I've had digestion issues. I have chronic headaches, all the things, tension in my body, thought nothing of it, felt like it was just, again, very genetically predispositioned. I saw very similar patterns in my family. So this is just kind of what I thought it was for me.
Right.
However, what started to then happen is I started to faint. I started to have really serious cognitive. I had a hard time remembering my words in session. Particular, I would just kind of lose trains of thought. And then obviously when fainting started to happen, I got scared. I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? And that little anxious person inside was convinced that this was the symptom I was waiting for. And there's something is genetic, I'm physically sick. That was a gift, actually, because what I did, as a lot of us do, I went online and I was like, okay, what's wrong with me?
Exactly.
And I was
Google.
Really scared. And so what I was met with actually was really relieving, because what I started to research and become aware of was a new science, the world of epigenetics, the reality that many of us are living, that yes, we have genetics, and then we have the choices that we're making each and every day. And what epigenetics is now telling us is that while we're, dealt the deck of cards that our genes give us, those choices that we're making, our lifestyle, how we're taking care of stress, how we're feeding our body, and all of that in between, that's actually affecting whether or not our genes are turning on and turning off. That was that cracked open the door. I was still unwell. In a lot of ways. However, that was my first, kind of slimmer of light through, because up until that point, I didn't think that there was a conversation of healing. I thought the conversation that I was, me and many others, were having with ourselves was management. Okay, these are the ways that I am, emotionally, this is what I'm capable of. Maybe physically, this is what I'm capable of. And there's kind of like, this is my lane, right? And I can't really go outside
deviate from that
of that lane. So what epigenetics meant for me was I just started to question. I didn't believe it yet, but I was like, interesting. You're telling me that I can create change, and that maybe these physical symptoms are coming from these choices that I'm making every day. And I entertained it. So for me, that was a pivot. And then obviously there was a lot of choices I began to make that led me into all of this other awarenesses. So my first stage of the journey was trying to heal my body, because I was fainting. Like I said, I wasn't doing well. My system was screaming out that something was wrong. So I created small lifestyle changes. I made sure my sleep was in order. I made sure my nutrition was in order. And then I started to practice consciousness. And that's where I really developed the kind of pivot in the way that I work. Again, beginning to differentiate the difference between a conscious self and way of being, contrasting that with the subconscious, that autopilot that you and I keep kind of going back to. And then that's where I really began to understand the nature of our stuck. So for me, it kind of happened in shifts.
In stages.
And I think for a lot of us, it is important to understand, the dysregulation in our body, that stage first, so that we can begin to, kind of minimize because a lot of the reasons we're stuck is because of imbalances in our bodies and our nervous systems in particular.
And so then what is, because I know I've seen you talk about this a lot, conscious awareness. What does that really mean? And how do people really get to that place?
So thank you. So this is kind of the crux of it.
You're welcome.
Because consciousness, and people probably, I talk about consciousness so much. It is that pillar of foundational change.
And if people follow you and they don't notice that that's one of the major things, that and trauma, I feel that you speak about a lot, right? So we'll get to that later.
And the two are related.
Yes,
it just so happens.
they are.
So
by coincidence, I'm sure not.
Just by coincidence. So going back to this part of our mind, it's ever powerful. We have a space that stores quite literally everything that's ever happened to us. It's the house of our habits and our patterns. It's called the subconscious, the computer analogy that we all love to hate. It's all the programs that we run day in and day out. And the reality is we're very habitual creatures. Even though a lot of us don't like to admit it, we do have those programs. We are behaviorally, we have the same habits and patterns day in and day out. We're even very habitual in the thoughts that we think that lead to the feelings that we have. So that very powerful subconscious begins to be imprinted upon since we get here. However you believe it is that we come to this, earth journey, we begin to be imprinted and we begin to lay those programs down. So using that prime example that we've been talking about, when you and I are in a session, right, and we're having all this insight, chances are we're operating from our conscious mind. Consciousness just means I'm present in the moment now. I'm not operating. It's a different part of our brain. It's called the prefrontal cortex up here, as opposed to more or less back here where our subconscious lives.
Right.
So where those sessions were happening, or where even our aha moments are happening for ourselves, typically it's in our conscious mind. We're able to see the past, problem solve, and create a new future. However, the where that kind of gets derailed is the fact that most of us, upwards of, depending on who you read, 95% of our day, we're not operating from that conscious state. We're allowing that subconscious and all of that programs to determine. So that's where those habits and patterns live. So that aha moment on Tuesday in session, right? If I came up with a plan for Wednesday, the next time my partner says a thing that bothers me and I'm going to do this, right? By Wednesday and that partner statement, chances are I'm already in that subconscious autopilot. So what's really going to happen, even though I laid some great, insightful plans yesterday, probably I'm going to live that same old reaction because I'm not conscious. I'm not able to create change.
Well, then how do we start doing that? Even if we acknowledge it and we're aware of it, how do we make it so when we make that plan, we actually execute on that plan?
We have to practice consciousness. So the first is becoming aware of how unconscious we are.
Okay.
Typical suggestion I like to give. We all walk around with a cell phone these days. Set an alarm on your cell phone for random times throughout your waking day. So probably by the time the alarm goes off, you won't even remember that you set it.
Yeah.
When the alarm goes off, when you ask yourself, note, where was my attention? Was I lost in thought? Was I worrying about, the argument with my partner that morning? Was I worrying about tomorrow? Was I just somewhere else entirely? Or was I present in this moment? If the answer is I'm not present, I was somewhere else, we want to begin to flex our consciousness muscle. We now know our brain can change, right? Neurons that fire together, wire together, neuroplasticity, we can create new pathways. So we need to practice consciousness in that moment and beyond that moment. And the vehicle for the present moment that most of us can access is through our senses. Right. So a simple sensory check-in, right? The alarm goes off. Oh, I was lost in thought about, that fight I had this morning. I want to become present. I want to activate consciousness. I can tune in. What can I touch in this moment, right? What am I smelling? Maybe I'm eating. Maybe there's lunch in front of me, right? Maybe I can tune into the taste of the food on my plate. When we're paying attention through our senses, I've now brought myself from wherever unconscious state I was in into the present moment. And then we want to build on that practice, meaning we want to try to be in that conscious state as much as possible. Because when we're in that conscious state, when we're here in the present moment, that's when we give ourselves the chance to make a new choice, to make a choice that's maybe counter to what our subconscious would have done otherwise.
And have you done this with your healing process? And I guess people shouldn't get discouraged, because I would imagine that it takes a lot of practice to really kind of get into that space, right? Because
very lot of practice, because most of us are so used to, and some of us aren't even aware of how to access the present moment. Because for a lot of us, the tendency to not be present to the moment began, this includes myself, and I'll share with you in a second, that began when we couldn't handle the present moment to protect ourselves from what was here because it was painful. So to answer your question, consciousness was integral for me, because what I came to realize when I, became aware of myself in this new way, I came to realize how disconnected I was. So those words, how I described myself earlier, I'm flat, I'm not here, I'm unfulfilled. That was my reality because I was something that we call dissociated. I was disconnected. Because for me in childhood, when stresses in my family were too overwhelming for my, young age, and I didn't have the support of an emotionally attuned mother because she herself was internally preoccupied with her own anxiety and her own fight or flight response, unable, to tend to my emotions, I did the best thing I knew how to do, which was I disconnected. And a lot of us live in that state of dissociation. That's safe to say that's a state of disconnection, of lack of consciousness. So for me, Jen, probably the better part of the first year of healing, that's all I did. I practiced being conscious, and I practiced making those small lifestyle changes from that conscious state, paying a little more attention to what I put in my body and how it made it feel, paying a little more attention to what time I was going to bed and how I was sleeping, and making those small changes. Because until I learned how to be conscious, and then obviously in my body, because that's another part of it, even attuned to what my body is feeling in those moments, I couldn't really do the deeper work. So it's safe to say that a lot of us, a large majority of us, especially if you're resonating with the state of dissociation or have heard about dissociation or know that you dissociate, consciousness is going to be the foundation.
So then is that the trauma that you're talking about, that even if it may not be, you don't have to necessarily be sexually abused to have trauma, right? Trauma is a very large, I guess, what would you call it? Like it's a very big thing you can be, right? There's different degrees of it.
Yes.
So you could have trauma in a smaller state that really does affect you throughout your life, right?
Yes.
And then from those patterns, you end up choosing people or going into a pattern, like you behave. I heard you speak about this and write about this as well. Then you end up being a certain kind of person that ends up picking people, or it kind of like a trickle effect, right? Like it's one thing, it snowballs, like your social media, right?
Yeah.
And how do you kind of stop that? Like if you can, what's the next step, I guess? So now you're more, I guess I'm babbling to say, once someone now kind of practices awareness and conscious awareness, what do they do? What's the next thing that they can do to kind of stop those patterns that hurt them as an adult?
We want to become, so there's the conscious state, and then there's learning how to observe oneself or witness, right? Because we want to see the patterns in real time. Because you spoke something very profoundly. When we're children, and I do believe that there's a much more expansive definition of trauma than many of us are operating within. In the 90s, very thankfully, we had the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And essentially at that time, to keep it simple, for the first time in the psychological world, we determined that there are traumas. They at that time were referred to as big T: the sexual abuse, the physical abuse, the profound neglect, having a parent incarcerated or severely mentally ill. And there's a couple other ones. I think there's 10 questions. Depending, the higher, the more boxes you tick, the more traumas you've experienced, right? So at this time in the 90s in our field, we've came to attest with research now that yes, bad things that happen in childhood affect you in adulthood, because that's what they were studying. They were saying now, not just in childhood, they were saying you could have had this trauma when you were 6, and now when you're 60, you might be suffering the consequences still of this. This is the first time we even studied that in the field in the 90s. However, when I took the ACEs, I scored only a 1. I think 60% maybe of the population. That's not very high, put it that way. So again, this was a point of confusion for me. Yet I was seeing the same pattern of dissociation that I was seeing in people who scored a 7. Because I've worked with people in extensive different, contexts and treatment facilities, previously incarcerated, substance use. I mean, I worked with people with 8s, 9s, 10s, right?
Wow. You went the gamut of it.
I really did. So, and that's why I was confused, because I'm like, okay, well, I understand why they are struggling. Why am I struggling? Again, probably because something's wrong with me. I'm defective, right? I'm less than, I'm not worthy, all of the things that we tend to believe. Anyway, so I say all that to say, I believe that there's a reason and that there's a broader definition of trauma that, again, originates in childhood. So when we're in childhood, to keep it simple, we are born as humans in a complete state of dependency, meaning we can't meet our needs. I've never had a child, but anyone who has had an infant, they need a caregiver of some kind to meet their physical needs.
Right.
Again, I believe we have emotional needs that are present from birth. And again, I believe they're spiritual needs. Our core spiritual needs, just so we can get clear on how I define those.
Yes.
I believe there's 3 quite simple ones. Our essence, our being, whatever you want to describe, the thing that makes you, you, and me. I believe that at our core, 3 needs that we share are to be seen, to be heard, and to have the space to just be who I am, to be in that, uniqueness that I am.
Be understood.
Be understood, right? To be seen. It's just who I am. It's different from you, maybe, and that's okay too, right? Back to that state of dependency. We are reliant on other people to first meet our needs. And then by meeting our needs, that's the model that we internalize over time within how we meet our own needs, right? So how our parent shows up and teaches us how to care for our physical body, chances are becomes the way we care for our physical body. Same thing with our emotional needs, right? How our parents help us express our emotions or not. And again, we all have very different experiences. That becomes the very patterned way that we take care of our own emotions. Same thing with spiritual. If you have a parent who self-expresses and allows you to self-express, that's going to typically be what we do. So what happens for a lot of us, this is when we get really adaptive because we know we need those people. We're so attuned as children. I think children are the most intuitive
absolutely agree.
Beings, attuned beings on the planet, and adaptive beings. So what they do is they adapt. They find the way to ensure that the needs are met to the best of that caretaking environment's ability, right? They show up, if you will. They, kind of sanction off maybe parts of themselves or their emotions if they got negative feedback to maintain those connections that we need.
Yeah.
And then what happens is we repeat those patterns. We take on those same roles in our relationships. You're the caregiver with your mother. Chances are you're the caregiver in all of your relationships as you develop over time. And then that sets into place, right, all of these habits and patterns that by the time I am in my 30s, 40s, 50s, I become the human who's maybe not tending to my needs, who's showing up or who's playing roles to my own disservice.
And that plays out in a whole other litany of ways, right? Like of unhappiness. Then who are there's so much people who are saying you can't blame your childhood on how you are as an adult. You can't blame this. You can't. Now, do you feel that then talk therapy or traditional therapy of some form, do you do that? Do you believe in combining how you feel people should heal with that? Or do you just feel it's just not necessary because it's basically the hamster wheel? Yeah. You spend a lot of money going down the same path, doing the same thing. And you know what? Reality is, I know many, many friends of mine who've been in therapy for 25 years, twice a week, and they're not any better off than they were, year 10, right? Like it becomes that becomes your habitual thing. You at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, I'm going to, to sit with my therapist, right? And I think that's probably why people do resonate with you, because in everything that you just even said by now, like people can feel themselves in that a little bit to some extent, right? Because we've all had something, like we said, trauma can be super broad. It doesn't have to be something small. Yeah. And then then what? I'm just fascinated. What?
Just to clarify, there is a time and a place for therapy, I think, in each of our journeys. I don't speak to the exclusion of it. My work is misinterpreted, and I've heard people tell me that I've said not to go to therapy.
Oh no, I didn't say that.
No, I'm not saying you said that. I'm just clarifying that for you, just for people, because I do think sometimes a lot of people do find support, in an outside person and having that space. What is most important, and because this is where I feel anything, whether it's the therapist, the gym, anything we're doing for 1 hour, say a week out of however many other hours are in our week, is going to be limited, because that autopilot, that subconscious, is going to be at play the rest of the time. Right. So therapy can be incredibly helpful as a tool as well as what am I doing daily, as well as those lifestyle choices.
It's consistency with life.
Consistency.
So it's and routine and consistency. Yes. Like you said, 1 hour a week doing anything. If you work out only 1 hour a week, or if you only eat one good meal a week, you're not going to get results. Right. But I feel what you do, maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, you put the onus on the person, on the cell, on me, and empower yourself to make those daily changes to have long-term effects.
Yes. The consistency is what we need for those long-term effects.
Right.
Maintaining consistency is incredibly difficult because of our subconscious.
Absolutely.
Our subconscious operates, I used the word evolutionarily earlier. Our subconscious is based on one principle. It's to keep us safe. Now, to clarify what safe means for evolutionary value, right? To sustain life of my organism.
Right.
According to my subconscious, that which is safe is simply that which is familiar, because I know what comes next.
Right.
Because to the human, the uncertainty around that next corner could be the bear that kills me. I mean, I know this sounds, kind of crazy, and you're looking around. None of us are really living in, in that survival, kind of outward state anymore. So we're still, though our subconscious is still governed in that way. Familiar equals safe. That's why change is universally hard to maintain. Because before long, as I start to make new choices, to wake up a little earlier, to sit in silence, to think a new thought, that's what an affirmation is. It's only a matter of time, and sometimes it's very quickly for us, that subconscious, who's on alert at all times, becomes uncomfortable with that change.
Right.
Doesn't know what happens next once you do this thing again and again and again.
Right.
And then what happens, this is what I call it, we get a form of resistance. It could come cognitively. A lot of us live in our monkey minds, thinking our way through life. So what this resistance could look like, the million reasons why not to do this new thing. You don't keep things, you don't keep your habits anyway, Jennifer, so stop it. Or you know what you should really be doing? You have a son, so you should probably be taking care of him, right?
Yeah.
All of the reasons not to. And or some of us get it in our bodies. We feel agitated. Mm-hmm. We just feel maybe just not like ourselves, weird, different than we normally do.
Yeah.
And before long, it's only a matter of time before we give in to that resistance. We take it to be our truth, right? Okay, you're right. I can't change. And then we're right back in that familiar rut, in that familiar pattern of our subconscious.
Right, because everything is for long term. You have to be working on it all the time, right? Now, what happens if you're with somebody and you've kind of come to that place where you are getting more consciously aware and you've recognized that the partner you're with is not on the same page as you? How does that mean that's when you stop a relationship, or what do you do in that situation?
I get this question a whole lot.
I'm sure.
And usually it's in the form of some version of how do I get
I was gonna say,
my partner, my mom, to change, to see, to change, to heal, to walk the journey with me. Again, completely normal.
Right.
For many reasons. We're in a relationship. We want to continue. We love this person. We can see, I'm objective. I'm separated from you. I'm not you. So for us, we can maybe see the patterns in our loved ones more clearly.
Yeah.
And want them to change from a very well-intentioned place. So I get a lot of this question. Sure. And my answer is always some version of the same thing, which is to, turn that focus back on the self, to create the change in you, as you're continuing to heal, regardless of what your partner does or doesn't do. Some pathways do lead down to the relationship shifting or changing or ending. Doesn't mean it has to. My current relationship, I began healing. Me and my partner were what I call a trauma bond, which really just means repeating those patterns that we both learned in our subconscious, right? We were both in our zone of familiar when we met each other. It felt familiar. It felt comfortable. Doesn't mean it was a fulfilling, full, authentic relationship.
Most people do that, though.
Most people do that.
Yeah.
Most of us are attracted to those patterns, to playing those same roles or eliciting the same feelings, getting loved the same way.
Exactly. They speak the language. They're giving you the love language.
In childhood. Yeah. Right. So we, again, because of that drive to the familiar, we gravitate. And this is, again, where we can be really hard on ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Failed relationship after failed relationship. What's wrong with me? Why can't I pick the right partners? Maybe very well-intentioned loved ones are asking, what the hell's wrong with you? Leave him. Get out. Can't you see?
Yeah.
And the truth is, no, we can't. We're locked in that familiar. It's fulfilling that need, that definition of self, of love, whatever it is, that we only ever knew.
Right.
So I share all of that because, in changing, while my partner and I very gratefully were healing together, right? It was never you change so that I can feel better, right? It was fully focusing on creating the healing in ourselves.
But were you doing it first and then they came along for the ride? Or are they in the same business as you? Like, how did that work?
Her and I mean, we're pretty much on the same path in terms of she was having things in her life percolating on or around the same time, hitting her kind of emotional rock bottom. Mm-hmm. However, the things we were working on and healing from were drastically different. The way we cope put us at odds. She's someone, I'm someone, right? Yeah. Who when I run, I shut down, right? That makes her scared. She approaches. So there was a lot of complicated aspects of the healing journey. But again, the work really is to turn it back and to say, what can I do now for me? And
you're still together?
We're still together.
Really? Mm-hmm. Because I would think that if people are both meeting when they were both in a trauma bonding, right? That when they're changing, they would pick different partners, not opposite, but different partners. How is it that you were able to kind of continue? Like, even though you're both, did you not feel that you wanted, when you recognized that you were seeking something different and same for her?
Well, this is where it gets profound because I believe that what we're seeking can only be found inside of us.
This is exact, and that's where it gets really profound.
This is why I'm kind of insistent on inward, because and I'm still learning emotionally because I was so dissociated. It's still taking me a long time to be embodied, to feel my feelings, to differentiate between what is this feeling? I don't even know what to call it, let alone what to do with it. So, in a lot of ways, I'm still, finding how to meet my needs. I'm still finding how to be, the spiritual being and just speak my truth, regardless of, how people are hearing it or reacting to it. So that's in my opinion, the life work is all of us are on the journey to meet our own needs. Now, again, this doesn't mean at the exclusion of others. I believe that the pathway to be fully authentically connected with others, because we are interpersonal beings. Humans are wired to connect. We need other humans.
Yeah.
However, so many of us are operating on patterns where we're trying to get needs met through other people that we have to focus inward first. We have to be able to fulfill ourselves, meet our own needs authentically before I can then authentically present them to another person in a relationship.
Because so much of what I just with my friends or whatever, like even if you are doing that and your situation or a lot of people, when you're in that situation, when you meet someone in that trauma bond, you both are working on it. What happens if you're not with somebody, but you're constantly being attracted to what is not right for you, but you say to yourself, well, I can't help it. That's who I'm attracted to. How do you stop yourself from like physically or what otherwise, what it would be when you have who you're attracted to, right? Because isn't that kind of that's so embedded in your DNA, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah. Attraction is, one of those elusive things. And we're all attracted to different things, in people. Awareness will allow you, right, to see that road, to play that path out, that person, right? And then allow you to make that choice to live a new pattern.
Wow. So you're still going through the trauma bound. This is not like something that you can kind of like, you kind of get better at and then you move on to the next issue.
None of this is. So even, when I talk about consciousness, there's still moments where I'm not conscious. I check out. I'm not fully present in the moment, right? So all of this is ongoing, right? Those old patterns for me are right there behind the surface, especially around my wounds, right?
Right.
Those things that make me emotionally activated are still there, right? There's can be moments in real time where whatever thing happens in my world and I hear that ego voice. I hear, right, what I want to say or do next. And yet I can still, this is what I call kind of expanding our consciousness. I can allow that to be, and I can still learn to make new choices. So it doesn't go away. Like I said, sometimes we slip in and out of consciousness. There's still moments where I react. I yell, I scream, I detach, I dissociate, and I come back. I'm like,
Right.
And then I
yourself.
acknowledge, I offer myself compassion. I maybe offer to whoever I was around at the time my awareness of what happened. And then I work on building consciousness and creating change in that next moment. So yeah, there's no light switches. We all love that. I'm not like done. Exactly. I've been looking for this place of doneness. If anyone finds it, let me know. I used to call it my utopian hammock in the sky. I don't know where it is. So it's life in. And that's why I think it's so important when we are incorporating the changes to do so in a small way so that we can maintain consistency, so that we can walk through the resistance that's going to be there in our subconscious, and so that we can do this every day. Because that's what we're talking about. Like you and I agreed, it's not just white knuckling it, doing 5 new things for the next month. Right. And then what happens day 31, day 32, right? We want to create something that's maintainable, which unfortunately for a lot of us means change comes slower, right? Relief comes slower. And I understand the desire to make it all better, especially when we're really uncomfortable. Of course, I come from a family too who wants to take the pill and be done with it and better tomorrow.
Right.
And a lot of us want that, and especially when we're really hurting. However, what we're looking is, like I said, to set ourselves up to succeed, to maintain the change, and to live consciously every day so that we can be connected to our ever-evolving needs.
Right. That makes sense to me. I mean, it's complicated, but yet very simply, it's easy to understand.
It's the most simplistic, complicated thing in the world.
Exactly. That's a great way of putting it. What is emotional addictedness? What is that?
Mm-hmm. So I talk a lot about emotional addiction. Again, it lives in our subconscious. The very habitual way we think for a lot of us results in the very habitual way we feel. Right. And that feeling becomes that zone of familiar. So I'll use myself as an example. Growing up with a lot happening around me, I had a chronically ill mother and a chronically ill sister. My sister in particular had very big health issues when I was a kid. So there was a lot of stress, for lack of a better word, and not much emotional support for me.
For you, yeah.
Because understandably, my family was dealing with the next very real fire, making sure my sister was okay, making sure food was on the table, getting things like in order that we needed.
Is she okay now?
She's okay. Yes. So for me, stress, right, was the name. That zone of familiar, stress has hormones that are attached to it, right? Cortisol, adrenaline. So my body, the more stressful thoughts and stressful experiences I had in childhood, right, mapped onto the more cortisol that was coursing through my body. Mm-hmm. My zone of familiar became a stressed one. That's what my body knew as me.
Right.
So this is where it got complicated, right? If you would have heard me speak, especially by the time I entered my 20s, discovered psychology, knew I was going to be a psychologist, if anyone would have asked me, what are you looking for in life? You would have heard some version of peace. I just want peace. I just want to like hippie at heart, throw my peace sign. I just want like a peaceful existence. Yet this is what would happen. If I would find myself, right, in a peaceful moment, maybe I was alone, right, and I had nothing agitating me. Because my subconscious was so used to those high cortisol levels, it was only a matter of time before one of two things would happen for me. And I learned this because I observed myself. Right. I watched myself enough. I witnessed what happens when you are alone, Nicole. What happened was my house would be clean from top to bottom because I would have so much agitation from that cortisol and that adrenaline that I couldn't talk about meditating. Nope. Couldn't sit. Wasn't doing that. Right. Definitely wasn't meditating alone on that day. I'd clean my house from top to bottom. That was how I would discharge. If I wasn't alone, or if I was accessible to my partner, I would agitate the relationship. Before you know it, I'd be saying, you know what? I didn't really like the way you looked at me this morning. And what did you mean by that statement?
Did you know you were doing it at the time?
Not at the time. No, I would observe. And then before I knew it, lo and behold, I was in an argument. And I was stressed out and I was upset. So that pull, right? Because our mind and our body are connected. So what was happening in that moment, my mind was picking up on all the cortisol, all the adrenaline, and it was trying to make sense of why. So it did. Well, why is because you're agitated. So go deal with that. Yeah. Either go clean the shit out of your house
right.
or annoy your partner and cause the argument. And a lot of us do that.
Wow.
So the emotions that we're addicted to are different. For some of us, it's sadness. For some of us, it's anger. And again, it's just that pull of that subconscious. And when I'm not in that familiar state, because my mind and my body are connected, before I know it, I can create that state in my life.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people are like drawn to tumultuous relationships, right? Yes. Where there's a lot of fighting and passion, because at least you feel something.
That
right?
was what was emblematic of my trauma bond with Lolly. In the beginning, she and I together created that roller coaster. There was emotional highs and lows.
Yeah.
And then a fight would be picked and we'd fight, and then she'd run and flee, and that would activate me because my mother wasn't emotionally available and I'd chase her.
Yeah.
And then she'd get more upset and yell, and then before we know it, we're on our roller coaster together.
And but that also like makes you feel like alive, and then you have passion because of it. Because I think this is an interesting thing, because people I think confuse like melancholy sometimes and boredom with like no love. Like, I'm not really in love with him. You think lust and love is the same thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So like, because that's a great example. I have that similar type of personality like that you were saying with you and Lolly. Is that her name? And so how do you get over that? Like, it's hard to like, that's an adrenaline thing too, right? It's like, I feel that's a really hard thing to shift out of into this other place.
I love, Jen, that you just said I'm bored. Yeah. Because if you were to ask my parents and my sister what my favorite, they might have said my middle name was Nicole, I'm bored. Yeah. LePera. Because when I wasn't, I was very active physically as a child. I had things every night of the week. And when I didn't, I was bored. Or so I thought. I just wasn't activated. So you'll hear me talk a lot in the context of relationships. And I think culture and TV does a lot of it too. Yeah. We are presented messages that relationships are these volatile highs and lows and these very romantic moments of, infatuation.
It's like romantic comedies are built on this whole thing, right?
And the reality of it is authentic love, once you're out of the honeymoon stage, for a lot of us, is boring. It's boring. Calm. It's, dare I say, peaceful.
Yeah, exactly. Or the word knows are boring. I mean, it's true though, right? But that's when, and then a whole other litany of issues come, because you mistake boredom for like unhappiness, right? Because I would imagine with what you do, you said you wanted peace when you thought when you were younger or whatever, what you'd want to be. I feel that the word that people use, I want to be happy. It's such a like superfluous, like it's such a nonsense or arbitrary word, right? Because happiness could be meant in so many ways, right? And like, how do people really find, I know you're going to say it within yourself, right? You got to find happiness. But when you hear that from people, what do you say to them?
First question would, just because you very astutely, again, what is happiness? It means something different to all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Life is subjective. I learned this very early on in the context of a clinical experience. So anxiety, I know. And I had a supervisor once tell me, right, when we were talking about, patients with anxiety, for instance, she said, I want to urge you now, if anyone ever comes in your office, right, and you say, what brought you in? And they say anxiety, don't assume you know what they mean, even though you're very intimately connected to the experience of anxiety, because they knew enough about me, right, the supervisor at the time. And that was so profound to me. Because I came to realize in that moment the truth of the matter, that you could say anxiety, I could say anxiety, we both go, yeah, we're anxious. And we could be both talking about two different things.
Really?
Right? Your anxiety experience might be, something in your body, or, you might just be defining it different than how I experience anxiety. And that's so same thing with happiness. So the first question, and sometimes we say things that maybe we don't even know what we mean. Yeah. So the first inward exploration would be to define what is happiness. My answer for happiness probably will be different than yours, and will be different than everyone else's in this room. Right. So getting clear on what happiness means to you, and being okay if you don't know, finding your way, finding the definition of happiness. And I think that's a really core component of a lot of the work that I do, because we are very subjective. We are very much coloring our experiences with our past, with our own meanings. So it's really important for us to get clear first for ourselves about what we mean. And then once we have that definition, then we could start to find the path of how to create happiness, for instance, in our life.
What is the biggest question that, besides that kind of question, what's the biggest issue you feel that people are really struggling with the most these days?
I think disconnection from self that then gets reflected. It'll come out and what you'll hear. I'm unfulfilled in my relationships. I'm disconnected from people, or I'm disconnected from the world. I'm unfulfilled in the world. I believe all of that, again, originates when we're disconnected from ourselves,
right,
authentically first and foremost. But some version of that disconnect and the results of it, I think pretty much sums up what most of us are struggling with.
And so what do people do to kind of start that process besides being aware? I know that was for being consciously aware. How do people like start even getting to that place? Simple,
difficult question to ask oneself in as many moments as we can.
Yeah.
What do I need right now? First, hitting pause. That's stepping into the consciousness, right? Not just going about my day and, I don't even know what I need. This is just what I do next.
Yeah.
Hitting that pause, coming to consciousness, checking in with myself right now. What do I need right now? Do I need this drink of water? Am I okay, right?
The senses, the senses that you're saying?
Once I'm conscious, right? So we need to become conscious, or else I'm just going to go about my day and probably not ask myself what I need, nor know what I need in that moment. So we want to do our consciousness check-in, and now I'm here, and do this as many times as we can throughout our day. And then begin to practice that simple question. I said simple yet complicated, because for a lot of us, we might not know. We might have no idea what we need in this moment. And then we need to find our way, learn, right? Checking in with our physical body. Well, am I cared for? Am I hungry? Am I not? Learning those cues. Each of our body tells us things differently. This is where there's no roadmap, right? A lot of us are looking, well, what are the steps 1 through 5 to do this?
I'm a tactile.
And unfortunately, right? So this is where we have to become the intuitive being, right? That we started out as children. We all do know.
Yeah.
We all know, but we need to be able to drop into ourselves. For some of us, we need to be able to listen to our intuition and give ourselves the space to allow the knowing to come to the surface, because so many of us are just blowing through life, doing, actioning, thinking, trying to ask myself from up here, what do I need? Instead of dropping in, saying, well, what do I need? Well, how does my body feel, right? Does it feel like energetic or low? Right?
Yeah.
That could be a star. Am I hungry? Am I not hungry emotionally? What am I doing? So stopping, pausing, and then saying, what do I need? And being okay with not knowing, and being okay with feeling our way and not thinking our way to that answer.
Are you someone then, you said you didn't like meditation before. Are you someone that meditates now?
Now I do.
You do.
So the way I created a habit of consciousness, which is what I suggest, is I did what I was suggesting in terms of that conscious check-in in my day. I didn't start a meditation practice where I shut my eyes and I sat, because it was too overwhelming. I felt like I was crawling out of my skin. I didn't like what my mind was telling me. And I definitely had too many things to do. I definitely did not have the time to be sitting there. So it did not. And that's why I definitely suggest to begin to practice consciousness throughout our day. Right? Even something we're doing can be a hook for our attention, if not our senses. When you're washing the dishes, focus on the sensory experience of washing the dishes, right? Using your attention there. That's how I began to practice consciousness, because sitting was overwhelming. Now, for me, the act of closing my eyes, shutting the world out, that's the space in my day. And I do practice it each and every day in my morning routine, where I connect with myself, where I start my day connected to what I believe is my spiritual being, and then allowing me to open the dialogue, to hear how I'm doing, to see what comes up. So now I sit, not, 10, 15 minutes, nothing extensive, though that's quite some time. And like I said, I did not get there overnight. So anyone, practice consciousness in daily life. Like I said, that could be a little less overwhelming. What am I doing? Especially when I'm doing something sensory based, like the shower, the dishes. Maybe those are things we used to hate, right? We could change our relationship with those things. And if we are going to evolve into a sitting practice, or if you would find value in a sitting practice, 1 minute, 2 minutes, right? Nothing. Don't put that timer the first time you're going to meditate onto not even 5 minutes. That's a long time to be sitting. And for me, the value I find in that is that gives me the place to just be connected with me. And like I said, I do it in the morning, so before I start my day.
So what is your daily, like what do you do in the morning? What is your daily routine?
Yeah, absolutely.
Your morning routine.
So I say this again from a recovering person who hated mornings. I definitely would feud with my dad for a very long time in high school over mornings, because I've trained myself to get up at an early hour. I'm usually up between 5 and 6.
That early?
In the morning.
And you don't even have kids?
I go to bed very early. I'll get to my bed.
I was going to ask you your night
I'm in bed
routine.
by 9. And I And for me, the morning, so this began when I was still seeing clients, which I don't do anymore. So I had a time of my day where I would start in client work. So for me, having the mornings to not only care for myself, but then begin to do some of the creative work that I was doing as I was creating the account, mornings was the time, because by nighttime I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
So it was very begrudging that I started to get up that early. I definitely wasn't excited about it. Now I love it. Now it's really that time before emails are coming in. I mean, emails are there, but before I tune into them if I'm good.
Exactly.
So in the mornings, if all goes well, I'm up somewhere between, naturally, I don't set an alarm. So again, if I need a little more sleep, I might sleep until, a little bit closer to 6 and I'm up. And then in the morning, you'll always see me do the same sort of routine of things. I engage in a practice that I call future self journaling. Each and every morning, it's my practice. I developed it when I was healing, and I still do it years later. It's where I set a conscious intention to change, to maintain that habit. So each and every day I have some journal prompts. So anyone who's interested listening, wants to sign up for my email list, I actually just put out an expanded version. So a whole how-to PDF packet. Really what it is each and every morning, I set the intention to continue doing the things that I want to do differently today. The value in that, it's my reminder.
It's a visual.
It's my visual. It's my reminder. And when I write it, and I suggest, and if anyone who wants these journal prompts in this guide will see it listed in there, I write as if it's already happened, as if I'm already doing those things in my day. I am this. This is happening. I feel this way, even if it's not yet true. Because what we're harnessing in that moment is two things, two beautiful parts of this brain that we're gifted with. The fact that it doesn't know what's real and what's imagined. Right. So if you're saying it in real time as if it's true in that moment, your mind believes it to be true.
Yeah.
And in doing that repetitively, consistently every day, you're practicing mental rehearsal. You're firing up that new pathway. The more it's like your training ground.
Absolutely.
Because the change, now this is the caveat with the journal, it's not magic.
Okay.
You don't close it, the sparks don't come out, and you're not poof that different person. You still have to show up for yourself throughout that day. You still have to remember to do that consciousness check-in that you said you would do in the morning. You still have to remember to use your senses, right? To be conscious at that time later in your day. You still have to do the work throughout the day. However, that journaling tool helps, because if I didn't do that, chances are I'd slip right into that old pattern. And then it would be 7 p.m. and I'd be like, oh, shoot, I was supposed to do that new thing today. And I completely forgot.
Absolutely.
I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow slides right into that Groundhog's Day experience. So
I want that. I'm going to try that.
So you should check out the journal. Make sure it comes your way. So that's every morning.
Okay.
About 5 minutes it takes me. I write what I'm going to do. I, focus on my same pattern. So I journal, I meditate. Again, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how I'm feeling that day. I stretch, I move my body. I do some version of whether it's a yoga, and that's a very mindful, conscious activity for me, or something a little more rigorous. Because I've learned that when my energy gets stuck in my body, it's only a matter of time before I'm back down those old habits and patterns before I don't know what to do with it, and I'm poking at you, and quarantine has been difficult in a lot of ways, for that. So for me, it's meditation, it's journaling, and it's movement every morning, pretty much.
And then at night, you said you have a night routine.
And so by nighttime, I'm usually done with my significant work by later afternoon. So by dinner time, I'm like segueing into peaceful evening, which means I'm probably not answering emails. I'm probably not working. I'm probably not watching anything that's going to stress me out.
At what time? 7:30? You said you stop?
Before dinner. I usually have dinner between 5 and 6.
Oh, why 6?
And then, so I'm probably not going to put on like the stressful news channel while I'm watching dinner. I'm trying to get myself into that calm state. And maybe I'm reading, I'm doing kind of low key calming activities so that I can be in bed around, 8:39 and then asleep by 10.
Oh, so you're sleeping by 10. Wow. So you're in bed by 9 o'clock, huh? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's the trick, because people.
The bedtime is really, because we all want a morning routine and we forget that we need sleep too.
The night routine is more important than the morning routine.
The night routine sets you up for the night routine. And the way I even allowed myself to have a morning routine is, and I I was not trained to go to bed, at 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock even. I was very much up until midnight, like a lot of us are. So I would just put my ass in bed and just wait there. And then so in the beginning, I did practice with an alarm. I would set my alarm for 5. I'd want to throw it against the wall and I'd get up anyway. Because I thought the more I just get myself up, that'll help me get more and more tired so that I can go to sleep and then wake up refreshed the next day.
So then that's great because I
reverse engineered.
You reverse engineered it. That's exactly what I was going to say, and it works.
It worked. I mean, it didn't work overnight. I think this was very much a long time coming. There was still, now I like my mornings and I get up willingly and I engage in all that willing. It took a while where I was just doing it. I was just keeping those promises to myself that I would do it, keeping those intentions before I actually wanted to. And I share that a lot because I think a lot of us wait to want to.
Yeah.
We want to wait till we feel like it. And again, with that resistance and that subconscious that we've just been talking about, that's never going to be the case. We are going to be waiting until we're done.
That's absolute. That's such a truism in life, though. That's with everything, though. You wait, like you think for kids, like, there's never a good time. You're always going to find something else. It's kind of in the same vein as what you're saying. You kind of have to force it along a little bit or just do it until it becomes your like new thing or your habit. I think that's so true.
Yes.
Then when did this whole, because your book's not out yet, your book comes out next year, but what was that whole, I guess you'll tell me, but you had such a huge response from your work that you decided, hey, I'm going to write a book. And then what happened? So
the book is really, the Instagram is a gift. Don't get me wrong. And I will never stop showing up on the Instagram. For me, it's
the Instagram.
For the Instagram. I mean, for me,
you're on Facebook too, though,
I'm
right?
on Facebook too. Okay. I kind of always am talking about Instagram, mainly just because that's the main platform and where a lot of the community lives. Though content's very similar across Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. I say all that to say, giving those free tools, equalizing access, spreading these messages to people who, like I said earlier, might be in other countries, might never have heard of this stuff, might not have access to these type of practitioners or these tools. That's really important to me. However, I understand the limitation of a little square and amount of characters, provide. So as I began to think about, kind of unify this theory and understand what that means and translate it into the practical tools, which yes, I am putting out daily in this much more constricted way, small way, I really understood that I needed this place where I could talk about the whole theory of, holistic psychology or holistic healing from start to finish along with the tools. So a book was the next natural progression.
But you do with these little spaces. I left this open on purpose because I always like take these little screenshots of things that you say. And I'm like, wow, that was so good. I said we were all wounded children walking around in adult bodies, having tantrums, fearing abandonment, seeking validation. Be kind. Like things like this, you fit a lot of information in like a square that's like, it makes you stop in your tracks and like think about it and like, wow.
Thank you.
No, it's true. So I mean, like actually, I think you do great with that little piece of information.
I appreciate it.
Oh, or you're saying like your behavior. What was the other one I liked? Not that recently, but how you act, you behave the way you feel, or I mean, who thinks of all these things? Do you just think about it in the moment and just kind of just spew it out?
A lot of it is informed by my day to day. I am very engaged with the community, so I'm watching. I'm always in the comments and kind of seeing, engaging, kind of tweaking based on what are they understanding, what is the need. I'm try to be as attuned to what is the natural progression, what are things that are coming up for the community that I can speak on, and just living in it. Sometimes it's my own life, the argument I had, the thing that happened over here. And so it's just very much there.
And it's honest. And you're also very honest.
Yeah, I share a lot of my own in the book too. So the book really is, what is holistic psychology? Like I said, understanding the unified whole, that we are physical bodies. I talk a lot about the different dysregulations, especially around our nervous system, that are keeping a lot of us stuck. I go into the whole world of relationships and emotional maturity and how we develop that. So it's really the unified whole in theory. Each and every chapter has workbooks, kind of like exercises at the end, so that we can apply. Yeah. I think that's a large reason, again, why the account is growing. A lot, like I said, I'm not unique. The things I'm talking about have been talked about in different ways with different language. I believe we're all just messengers of unified whole truths, universal truths that exist. However, I think I'm understanding that the way they're being talked about is in an understandable manner. And a lot of these topics have been just conceptual or theories or, okay, that makes sense over here, but what do I do in real life? How does this play out in my day to day?
How does it apply?
What do I do with this information? And so I say all that to say, I understand again, the growth of the account through that lens is that the way it's being talked about and understood is feeling more resonating. It is feeling more practical, and it's allowing people to do something, to action in a new way. So the book very similarly will offer that. And then throughout it, to speak to your point, I talk a lot about my own journey, about my own past, about the own, my areas of stuck, my relationship patterns. I give a lot of other anecdotal stories of people I've worked with, of people in the community, other self-healers. So people can see themselves. I know that we are all looking to see ourselves. We are all looking for those moments of resonance, for someone else's story to remind us just enough of ours, right? That
absolutely.
We can hold on to something. So I think that's a very important part of the book. And so throughout the book, you'll see that as well.
And then you were saying earlier about like the fact that people are so disconnected right now, especially, and that I think community is very, very important. Don't you have a community where people can kind of join? So
outside of just the engaged community on Instagram, which like I said, I'm always going to be there, and all of the Facebook and the YouTube, they're very engaged comment sections there. I'm watching people. My heart was just almost exploded the other day. On one of the posts, I was watching community members organizing accountability partners. Reaching out, just themselves, just in the comment section. Hey, I'm so-and-so. This is what I'm dealing with. Anyone want to be an accountability partner? Oh, I do. And I mean, I could have exploded right then just watching that. So really engaged community. Again, free access for anyone who has an Instagram account. I have last year, we just turned a year old. We have a virtual online community, the Self-Healer Circle. It's a little more in depth. It's a paid membership. Each and every month, we have a topic of healing that together as a group, I have outside experts that come in and present on each of these topics. And it's, again, a very interactive place. We just got a new website. So the newest gift of this past month, we built out our own website so that we can house this interactive virtual community. So all of the members are moving over, and it gives them that space that's not on all of the social medias, where, again, it's very community based. I believe we heal in community.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Well, you're like a fountain of information. I can go on and on with you.
I can talk all day.
Oh my God! Literally, you're so fantastic. How do people? What is your book out again? Next
March 9th. Yeah. It comes out. It's currently on pre-sale, so anyone who is interested in pre-ordering pre-sale, it will not be delivered though. It comes out. It releases on March 9th.
And for those who don't know where you are, how do people find more information or get engaged with your community? Where would they find you?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I can't talk about Instagram enough. So the community Instagram, the.holistic.psychologist. Anyone who's interested in YouTube, every Sunday I put out a short teaching lesson as well around all of these topics on the YouTube channel, The Holistic Psychologist. The Facebook page is The Holistic Psychologist. And if you go through the Instagram, I have a link tree that has the Future Self Journal prompts that you can easily sign up for free. Any of the links to pre-sale. There's quite a few international, so it'll be in several languages. So chances are, if anyone listening internationally, there might be a publisher that's able to get it in your native tongue, which is really cool. And again, all of that's on the link tree in the Instagram.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being a guest.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I want you to come back. I've got other questions I have on my page.
I know. I could have kept talking.
I felt badly. I'm like, my God, the girl's probably like just getting tired from like yapping already. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Habits and hustle, time to get it rolling. Stay up on the grind, don't stop, keep it going. Habits and hustle, from nothing into something. All out, hosted by Jennifer Cohen. Visionaries, tune in, you can get to know them. Be inspired, this is your moment. Excuses, we ain't having that. The Habits and Hustle podcast, powered by Happiness.